Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Duterte. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. For the next hour, you and I are going to go through all the news that is happening, not just here in our neighborhood, but elsewhere. And there's a lot to get to, so let's begin. A jaw-dropping security breach. A reporter says he was on a group chat where top White House officials discussed secret war plans. Lawmakers are calling to oust National Security Advisor Mike Waltz over his role in the fiasco. He's the one who added the journalists. Meanwhile, President Trump and his allies appear to be playing down the whole situation. We're tracking all the fallout and the impact on national security. Plus, explosive devices found in a Tesla showroom, what we know about this latest incident, and how the Trump administration is responding to the string of recent attacks targeting the car company. This is CBS News 24/7. But let's begin with that security breach that has everyone talking. A journalist says he was included in a text group chat with top Trump officials who were discussing sensitive secret war plans. The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, published a piece yesterday. He says he was added to a chat on the commercial messaging app known as Signal, and that it happened earlier this month. Now, those in the group chat included the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, Vice President J.D. Vance, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and a lot of other cabinet officials, the Secretary of State, the Director of National Intelligence. Now, Goldberg claims that the chat involved top U.S. officials discussing sensitive plans to attack Houthi targets in Yemen.
I found it completely improbable that the top national security leadership of the United States would be discussing on a commercial messaging app the possible imminent attack on another country. We have a responsibility to alert the American public in a democracy that this is what the government is doing. This is how the government is thinking about problems. And when you discover a massive security breach, it's our responsibility to report that.
Our Eleanor Watson is traveling with the defense secretary, and she actually asked him about all of this, about what happened. Here's what he told her.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro to talk about this. So first of all, Aaron, Jeffrey Goldberg late last night on CNN or another network responded to what this defense secretary said, called him a liar. Has the defense secretary responded to that claim that he's not being factually correct when it comes to the allegations that are being made?
Yeah, we haven't heard yet from Secretary Hegseth, but even what he said is kind of in conflict with what came out of the National Security Council, who confirmed the message thread was authentic and kind of spun it as a, quote, demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. Again, that's their spin as the White House and the cabinet continue to play damage control. But I want to start with President Trump this morning, who told NBC in an interview that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, quote, has learned a lesson and he's a good man. President Trump again told NBC that it's a non-issue and said it's, quote, a glitch in the last 2 months. We here at CBS News have been hearing some chatter amongst those who were already critics of Mike Waltz in the White House start to get in the president's ear, potentially about releasing him, asking him to resign, firing him. But White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reiterated just minutes ago that Trump continues to have confidence in Waltz, who is reportedly the person that added this Atlantic reporter to the Signal group chat, and threw doubt on stories claiming otherwise.
Not only that, he uses emojis, just like my 16-year-old nephew. Fist bump, American flag, a fire. Right. The other thing, Aaron, there's this message from supposedly J.D. Vance, the vice president, essentially going against. This is a guy who's very vocal in support of everything that President Trump, at least since he turned from being an anti-Trumper a few years ago. And in this message back and forth with these other national security officials and cabinet officials, he actually goes against President Trump. What is it alleged that he said in that text chat?
Yeah, it's a fascinating narrative within this story, the disagreement, the debate that Jeffrey Goldberg saw play out in the Signal group chat. Communications director for Vice President Vance said he, quote, unequivocally supports this administration's foreign policy, and that Vance and President Trump have talked about this and, quote, are in complete agreement. They also said that the VP's priority is, quote, always making sure the president's advisors are adequately briefing him. But Vance, who has said before that he believes Europe should do more when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, the economy, showed some real daylight between himself and President Trump in that group chat.
All right, Aaron, we'll check in with you a little bit later. I want to bring in Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He is a former national security advisor in the first Trump administration, of course, four-star general. So, General, you know, I recall, I can't remember exactly what devices it was, but I remember President Obama in his first term, I think he wanted to stay with his BlackBerry or his iPhone. I can't remember which one, but whatever one that wasn't secure. Do you recall which one it was?
Yeah, it was a BlackBerry. It was a BlackBerry.
Right. He wanted to stay with the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And national security officials said you cannot stay with the BlackBerry because they're not secure. You can't continue to use it. And even though he loved using his BlackBerry, he ultimately had to switch. Of course, we all remember what happened with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, when it was discovered that she was using a private email server. We had hearing after hearing on the Hill. I know that it was all politics, but there was a real reason for those concerns, which is the ability for foreign adversaries to have access to this information. So even if you think it's great that the American people have a little bit of insight into how brilliant these guys are in planning an attack on the Houthis, are there laws that are potentially broken here?
Yeah, I mean, there are. And, you know, every administration, new administration, is kind of a chaotic period, Vlad, and you get breakdowns like this. What I'd like to see is just the administration should just own it and say, yeah, we made a mistake. We're not going to do that anymore. But also, Vlad, you know, what we need is something that's more convenient for not the most classified conversations, not for war plans, certainly, but for just routine communications. I mean, there's not like a government app to make routine communications more secure. We need that. That can conform with like the Presidential Records Act as well, Vlad, which requires you to retain those communications and retain those records. But you know, these kinds of classified conversations, they should be held, you know, in a specially compartmented intelligence facility, like the Situation Room of the White House. And then if you have somebody traveling, you connect them via secure communications. Because, hey, you know, our adversaries, they're all over us, Vlad. You know, I mean, they're trying to get into your systems through encryption, break encryption like this, but also, you know, onto hardware. So it's really important to have, you know, secure communications facilities when you're discussing, you know, these top secret, most sensitive issues.
So can you explain to our viewers then how in a perfect world it's supposed to work? Because what Jeffrey Goldberg alleges is that he watched in real time the attack on Houthi forces play out as described by the detailed plan of attack that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared in this group chat. So given that this is a commercially available app, any one of us can use Signal. How should it happen? How should national security officials, the defense secretary, and others communicate with each other or watch in real time as an attack that's been planned happens?
So this was a part of the Principals Committee of the National Security Council. What this is are, you know, the heads of departments and agencies who have relevance, right, to national security decision making, and who help the president by giving him best analysis and teeing up options, making recommendations to the president. These kinds of conversations would typically happen in person, mainly in the Situation Room of the White House. The National Security Advisor convenes that group, presides over that group. If somebody's traveling remotely, you bring that person in through secure communications, which you can do on an airplane, you can do in a vehicle, or preferably you move that person into a U.S. embassy that has this kind of intelligence facility. I mean, that's all hard. It's not super convenient. And I think what happened here is they traded off security for convenience. You just can't do that. So, you know, every administration has like a big issue like this when they come in, because, you know, people don't get trained properly. You know, it's coming together on the fly, right? They're all traveling to Saudi Arabia. They're going to Moscow. They're moving. I mean, so what you need is a timeout. Okay, let's all get our procedures in place. I think what we're fortunate about here, Vlad, is that you had a very responsible journalist, who kept this to himself until after the strikes were over. So of course, this was a breach. I mean, I think what we want to see is the administration learn from it and put some appropriate procedures in place to make sure this never happens again.
Yeah, you raised a good point, General, which is that Jeffrey Goldberg, not only did he not reveal the name of a foreign intelligence operative, one of our foreign intelligence operatives who was named in these text messages by, I believe, the defense secretary. But the other thing that's been reported is that Steve Witkoff, who's the special envoy who's trying to put an end to the war in Ukraine, was actually in Moscow while this was happening and allegedly might have been involved, might have been one of those members of the group chat, the group text. So the question, of course, is, and you will know this in your former role as a cabinet official, how easy would it be for the Kremlin or Vladimir Putin to figure out what's going on a Signal app while Witkoff is literally in the Kremlin?
Well, I'm telling you, Vlad, don't even bring your phone to Russia. I mean, don't bring your computer to Russia. I mean, or other places, China. I mean, you don't carry your devices. Whenever I traveled, I brought a burner phone with me. You leave everything behind. And of course that doesn't eliminate the risk because they're coming after you all the time, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to get not only into your phone in a way that allows them to get through encryption, but also they try to compromise hardware. They collect on you directly. They are extremely persistent in terms of the nature of the threat there. So, hey, you have to take all countermeasures. It takes discipline to do that. It takes training. Even though you got the vice president who was a senator, but you have others who really don't have much experience, and it's important up front in the chaos of this administration coming together to take time out. I mean, I'm thinking back, Vlad, to the Kennedy administration, right? They came in kind of the same attitude. Hey, we're going to move fast, break things. We're going to be disruptive. Forget all those procedures from the Eisenhower administration. We're the whiz kids, right? We're going to make decisions quickly, informally. And you know what you get out of that, Vlad? You got the Bay of Pigs out of that, So we don't have anything that serious, but I think it's time to learn from this and to put the procedures in place. There are people on the permanent staff of the National Security Council, on the NSC staff who help with this. It's their jobs. Now, hopefully they haven't gotten doged, they haven't gotten moved out of government, but you need some of that professional staff to help you with this.
Yeah, I'm sure Elon Musk is wondering, hey, why wasn't I included in that? Somebody's head is going to roll. And speaking, before we go, General, I mean, should somebody lose their job? You point out that there may not be a lot of experience. I get it. Pete Hegseth was a former talk show host. But Mike Waltz is a decorated Army Special Forces colonel. He was a congressman. He would presumably have some insight into how this stuff works. And allegedly, he was the one who invited Goldberg into the chat. So somebody, should there be accountability? I know that this president isn't always one for holding folks accountable because he thinks that any time you hold someone accountable, you're admitting that you made a mistake. But should somebody be held accountable, just objectively speaking here?
Well, I think people should be held accountable just, to fix the problem, but I think the country, we all need this administration to succeed. And I think this administration has a much better chance to succeed with Mike Waltz in his position. Now, I might be hurting him with some people by saying that. But I really think that, what's interesting about this conversation, too, that we all have out in the open is kind of the nature of the debate that's going on within the administration between like those who I might call the retrenchers, right? Those who think we should kind of disengage from these complex challenges abroad and let other people deal with them, like the Europeans and others, and those who are like the America First people for President Trump, but who have a more internationalist perspective and a more active approach, not only to foreign policy, but also to national security and the need in this case, right, to remove this threat to international shipping from the Houthis. And what this debate shows us is that at least that debate is going on. And that's kind of a good thing. You want that debate to go on within the administration. I think Mike Waltz represents an important perspective there. It seems to me like he's playing kind of the honest broker to get everybody's views. Now, we didn't want to read that on Signal, right? That should be happening within the Situation Room. But I think Mike Waltz gives the president, a much better chance of success in these matters.
You're right about that, General. As Americans, no matter which political divide you fall on, you want the President of the United States and thus his cabinet to succeed because it makes all of us safe, makes all of us better. And so, yeah, I think we're in agreement on that. Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, always great to have you, sir. Thank you so much, as always. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you, Vlad.
All right, well, right now, we just showed you some live photos coming into us from Capitol Hill, where some of those intelligence officials that were allegedly on that text chain are on the Hill, and they're potentially going to be asked about this. So let's bring in CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. What have you been hearing since this meeting just adjourned, actually just opened up, Torian, just came to order about 10 minutes ago?
Well, Vlad, there couldn't be more daylight between Democrats and Republicans on this. We've seen Democrats, especially high-ranking ones, on the relevant committees like Mark Warner as a part of the Senate Intel Committee hearing that's happening right now with top intel officials. That's Tulsi Gabbard, DNI. That's Kash Patel, FBI head, and then Ratcliffe with the CIA, really reprimanding them and dressing them down for what he says is an embarrassment, the fact that the sensitive information was communicated over a non-secure line. We've also heard other Democrats call this utterly horrible and terrifying, considering that measures that are in place, like SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facilities, weren't utilized for this. And as you also discussed in the previous segment there are other means to go about communicating this confidential information without it being compromised. Republicans, though, are saying there's no there. In fact, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that they've already addressed this. It's now time to move on. I believe we have sound from him. Let's take a listen now.
The administration is addressing what happened. Apparently, an inadvertent phone number made it onto that thread. They're going to track that down and make sure that it doesn't happen again. What you did see, though, I think, was top-level officials doing their job, doing it well, and executing on a plan with precision.
This kind of carelessness is how people get killed. It's how our enemies can take advantage of us. It's how our national security falls into danger.
That stark divide on how to react to this present there, and both leaders taking to their respective pulpits and saying, listen, we believe for Republicans that there are more pressing matters like budget reconciliation that they should focus on, while Democrats are saying it might be time to look further into how this administration is operating.
All right, so you point out Democrats are furious, Republicans are playing it down. Might we see more hearings than just the one that was already on the books today?
Well, Vlad, I should remind you that Republicans hold both the House and Senate, so any official business probably won't happen. That doesn't mean that this could happen on a partisan basis. Democrats could hold a hearing of sorts, but it's unlikely that they would have the power to subpoena or compel the administration to testify around this. Again, it appears Republicans are looking to brush past this incident altogether, but it's unlikely that Democrats would be willing to drop this anytime soon.
All right, Torian Small for us. Thank you very much. All right, folks, this morning, the U.S. and Russia were expected to release a statement on Maritime, a ceasefire deal, but the proposed time for that has come and gone. So what we know about the ongoing talks, we're going to tell you, streaming CBS News 24/7. Judiciary Committee plans to hold a hearing next week to explore what Chairman Jim Jordan calls, quote, judicial overreach against President Trump. Jordan says the panel does not plan to call Judge James Boasberg as a witness. He's, of course, the judge who tried to block the recent migrant deportation flights to El Salvador. This is just one of the rulings in which the Department of Justice and administration have taken issue with. That has created a backlash against those judges who have made those decisions. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now here in Studio 55 to talk more about this. Good to see you, my friend. So you spoke to a federal judge whose son was killed by someone trying to attack her. What did she tell you?
5 years ago, her son was murdered. Her husband was wounded by a disgruntled lawyer who was coming to her house in New Jersey to target her. The warning from this judge, Esther Salas, is that this moment we're in right now, with judges being threatened with impeachment, being accused of being radical or leftists or rightists, is triggering a risk of possible attack. Esther Salas spoke with CBS News about her fears and about what she thinks could be done about it.
Criticism that's informed is one thing. Criticism that's misinformed, that mischaracterizes our rulings, accuses judges of being partisan with no bases, that's where I think we've now stepped way too far.
There are some numbers behind her concern, Vlad. The U.S. Marshals report more protective details are needed for judges now than any time in decades. And the U.S. court system says the number of hostile, menacing contacts to judges is up by orders of 3 in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. On one hand, Jim Jordan is not planning on calling these justices to the Hill, which I think is a good thing. But yet they still tweet about them. They still go in front of the cameras to talk about them. This seems unprecedented to me. I don't recall, even if the president of the United States would release a statement back in the day, you know, about a particular decision that he disagreed with, you wouldn't have members of Congress fanning the flames. Now you do on both sides of the aisle.
These judges should not be household names.
That's right.
And Judge James Boasberg is increasingly becoming one of those. That's a problem. That's a problem the judiciary is going to have to deal with. But these calls for impeachment do serve a political interest for supporters of the president who don't like these court orders slowing down his initiatives. But you make an important point. There are others who have targeted Brett Kavanaugh, Trump appointee to the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, there's a California man, Vlad, who is still on a trajectory to go to trial for allegedly planning to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh. There's a lot of blame to go around.
I like what you said, Scott. These justices should not be household names. An excellent point. Excellent reporting as always, my friend. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. All right, representatives from the U.S. and Russia have been meeting in Saudi Arabia discussing a potential ceasefire on the Black Sea, but it's just really unclear how much progress is being made. We are expecting a joint statement this morning, but we're still waiting. So joining us now from London for more on this is CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio. So Ramy, what's going on? Why have we not yet seen this joint statement?
Hey, Vlad, yeah, 6 hours and counting. No official reason yet from those delegations, but a Russian politician in parliament, and notably not at the talks, is claiming that it's because of Ukraine's position. That's how he said it, whatever that may be. And this politician claims that a joint statement was actually agreed, that it wasn't adopted, and that he couldn't say more until details are officially made. But we don't even know if that's actually going to happen based on what we're being told. Separately, Russia's defense ministry, they're pointing to Ukraine's latest strikes. Yes, Ukraine and Russia still are targeting each other, launching attacks at each other, this time on energy facilities over the past 24 hours or so. A power grid was hit. A gas facility was hit, along with an underground gas storage site. Moscow says that it shows that President Zelensky of Ukraine, can't be trusted with sticking to agreements. So potentially all of this coming together, which is potentially, again, we really don't know, potentially is why we're not getting a joint statement from the U.S. and Russia right now.
So how significant would be to get a ceasefire, a Black Sea ceasefire specifically?
Yeah, sure. A number of reasons, politically, economic, but you know, there's also the hope here, Vlad, that this could potentially lay the groundwork, could be the first step for more peace down the line. If there's this Black Sea ceasefire, this is first the maritime part of it. And, you know, over the past month, 2 months or so, there's been discussion, there's been hope that potentially this could be something along the lines of a greater ceasefire, maybe with a ground ceasefire, an air ceasefire, potentially towards a peace deal to finally end this war. For Ukraine, it'd be a big economic boost, you know, because grain exports, big part of the economy, wheat, corn, barley, sunflower oil, all coming through the Strait of the Bosphorus, going through the Black Sea to the rest of the world.
All right. Ramy Inocencio for us in London. Ramy, thank you.
Of course.
As we told you at the top of the hour, right at this very moment, top intelligence officials are being grilled on Capitol Hill about global threats. We're following that hearing closely in the wake of that group chat fallout. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, back to our top story, the discussion of sensitive information on the Signal text group chat. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett is joining me now live from the Pentagon to talk more about this. So, Charlie, yesterday we talked about the full court press to find a leaker at the Pentagon. I mean, now we've got full-on conversations about plans to attack Houthi rebels on display with a reporter from The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief, receiving all these text messages. So how's the Pentagon reacting?
Yeah, Vlad, remember yesterday? So long ago. To be honest, there are a lot of closed doors here today, but there's a reason for that. I mean, the Secretary of Defense is traveling, and he's taken pretty much the whole front of house folks with him. But, you know, just walking the halls, the people I've been speaking to, I would describe the mood as sheer bewilderment. You know, they have a phrase here and other places, but especially here at the Pentagon, when they want to deflect. They say, I don't want to get ahead of. In this case, nobody wants to get ahead of the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Now, he stopped in Hawaii, currently as part of the Indo-Pacific tour. And he really sought to undermine the story, what he called a deceitful and highly discredited journalist and a guy who peddles in garbage, is his words. And nobody was texting war plans. We may come back to how he's describing the conversation that took place. Operational plans, war plans, et cetera, that might become important, the information that he's using. But if you want the official reaction from Pentagon brass, that's it.
But even if they want to redefine what war plans are, the fact of the matter is that Jeffrey Goldberg, in the article that he wrote about this for The Atlantic, describes the information that he received included plans that he did not share in his article because first and foremost, he's a loyal American citizen, and you're not going to put out there information that might be detrimental to our forces. Also, Hegseth allegedly shared the name of a covert operative, which if you were not Jeffrey Goldberg, what I find really fascinating is in the language that the secretary used in describing Jeffrey Goldberg. If Jeffrey Goldberg was anything other than honorable, he would have, in other words, if this had been another person who had less than honorable intentions who had accidentally been added, this could have gone off the rails very, very quickly.
Absolutely, Vlad. And, you know, I think it's interesting that he pointed that out. I mean, I know Mr. Goldberg, he's not a friend of mine, but I'm familiar with him. He's been doing the job for 30 years. If I had come across information like that, I would absolutely be hesitant. I would know exactly what I could share and what I couldn't share. Because when you're talking about, like, target sequencing or battle operations, you know, you don't just go randomly drop bombs in areas where you've launched a full-scale attack, as was launched about 10 days ago, a week ago Saturday. You know, you have specific targets, and the targets that you're going for, first and foremost, are to aim for anything that might get your personnel in trouble, basically things that can fire back, right? So you're going to go for launch pads, you're going to go for radar control centers, command and control centers, because you don't want to imperil your fighter pilots or the jets. So when you're starting to roll that out, it might be argued that the Houthis weren't ever capable of reaching an F-18 that's bombing them from 30,000 feet. However, if you broaden that to adversaries like Iran or Russia or China, fully capable of getting that. And that's why there would certainly be a hesitancy to share that sort of information about U.S. tactics involved in a bombing campaign.
So, Charlie, we're just showing live pictures from Capitol Hill where some of those intelligence officials are testifying. If they start to do some Q&A, we're probably going to cut off our chat and go to them. But my last question to you would be with regards to violations of the law. Now, this is we have a president who was found to have taken classified documents from the White House and other locations to his private residences. Those were violations of the law. President Biden was also found to have done the same. Yet there were no repercussions suffered because of it. So even if these are violations of the law, can we potentially see, given that Congress is controlled by the president's party, will we see any accountability whatsoever?
Yeah, the big question there, Vlad, and we don't have the answer for that, is who's going to prosecute if there have been violations of the law, right? Is it going to be the Department of Justice? that can't be a dead certainty. Is it going to be the Senate who is going to encourage an investigation? I want to read to you. So there are rooms here, many rooms, and there's one, the White House Situation Room. It's called a SCIF, and I wrote it down because we know it is a SCIF, and it's sort of a top secret room. Everywhere you go around here, phones are not allowed to take in, take out, whatever. It is a closed environment. Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility is what SCIF stands for. The question here is, when you go into a SCIF and then you take information out of that, have you violated the law? Possibly, if not probably, because there are two ways that can be called into question. One is a violation of the Espionage Act, which criminalizes the mishandling of government records, sensitive military records, and that doesn't even need to show malice. It's just an unlawful removal of classified material and sharing it with unauthorized recipients, again, either willfully or accidentally. The other, and it kind of goes side by side, as I've learned here, is the Records Act. Quite an old one. That requires that like electronic messages and conversations that take place are preserved as a matter of record. So by its very nature, if you use Signal, as I do, even with my sources here, those messages get erased and they don't go back into record. So as again, who launches that investigation and whether there's a will to launch that investigation is another matter.
Yeah. And of course, Charlie, we know that Jeffrey Goldberg, after a few days, left that chat. I would like to know what it was like when all of a sudden you get the message, Jeffrey Goldberg has left the chat, and you get everybody looking and going, wait a second, who was that? All right, Charlie D'Agata for us at the Pentagon, my friend. Thank you very much. Let's go next to CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga, who's following the hearing that's happening right now on the Hill. So Nicole, have you heard that before the start of this hearing, that the story that broke yesterday afternoon was going to change the nature and the importance of this hearing?
Yeah, I mean, Vlad, it certainly changed the tone and tenor of the discussion already. Accounts that appeared to belong to both the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, you saw her testifying there, and CIA Director John Radcliffe, both, appeared to participate in the message thread, according to Goldberg's report. And those leaders are now sitting before a panel of some very angry lawmakers. I mean, keep in mind, these revelations also come just days after Gabbard announced an internal investigation at spy agencies into politically motivated leaks. We've also, by the way, been tracking reports of phishing attacks via Signal on Ukraine's cyber defenses. Ukraine's computer emergency response team putting out a statement last week indicating they've been targeted by malicious malware by Russian-linked developers. So the threat here is very real, just to make that clear to our viewers. And it appears, again, so is this text chain. The National Security Council saying in a statement to CBS News that it appears to be authentic. We've already heard from Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the top Democrat on this committee, saying the story shows the Trump administration's playing it fast and loose with the nation's most classified info, and that it makes Americans less safe. Just moments ago, I was taking notes on the hearing. He called this a pattern of cavalier attitudes towards classified information, not a rookie one-off, and argued that it impacts our relationship with our foreign allies.
So, Nicole, what were they prepared to talk about? What was the purpose of this hearing?
Yeah, I mean, look, foreign policy and its homeland security implications. I think it remains to be seen exactly how all of these administrations' policy impacts the homeland. But there are a lot of things going on. President Trump has been putting pressure on Iran to negotiate a new nuclear deal, warning there could be potential military action otherwise, looking to see if there could have been rippling effects there. Today's hearing also coming amid a series of arrests of college campus protest leaders who oppose U.S. foreign policy. And this, administration has cited national security concerns as the impetus. So we're looking to see if, U.S. intelligence backs that up. President Trump, who campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine, has taken a much friendlier tone towards Russia recently, temporarily pausing intelligence sharing and security assistance in Ukraine. So we're looking for that. And of course, on China, the president has declined to say if the U.S. would prevent them from taking Taiwan by force while he's president. So another, issue on our radar, especially as we've been reporting on China's pervasive cyber campaign targeting U.S. critical infrastructure. So still a lot of news on top of all of the chatter about Signal messages, and we expect to hear both out of this hearing today.
Yeah, and so ultimately, I guess the assessment is that if you're a Democrat, you're going to ask about this fallout from this group chat in Signal. And if you're a Republican, you're just sort of going to sweep it under the rug. Is that what you're hearing?
I think that's what we've been seeing so far, and certainly Republican lawmakers have tried to make the argument that, you know, this Signal messaging conundrum has actually showed thoughtful discussion between some of the nation's most powerful leaders. Of course, Democrats have chosen instead to cite some very real security concerns about presumably sharing top secret information on a commercial messaging app. So we do expect to hear more of that, as well as, you know, some other substantive discussion on some of the, you know, leading foreign policy challenges this nation is facing, and also what the U.S. intelligence is that backs up some of the policy decisions we've seen out of this administration.
Speaking about foreign policy, Nicole, in that group chat, there was some really incendiary language used about our European allies, language that suggested that they were pathetic, that they were, Vice President Vance allegedly saying that he was tired of bailing them out. I'm paraphrasing here. Have we had any reaction from the Europeans?
Yeah, pathetic, freeloading. It remains to be seen what our European allies will respond, if they'll respond directly to this sort of messaging conversation. We have had reaction, though, from the vice president's office. It was interesting to see the Vice President J.D. Vance, presumably in the group chat, arguing that, you know, perhaps the president is not aware that this targeted attack on the Houthis would actually stray from his foreign policy outlook on Europe. This idea that, you know, if we help our allies out through these targeted attacks, that perhaps it's just, you know, the Europeans freeloading off of U.S. military power all over again. So it was interesting to kind of see what seemed to be the most evidence we've had of a slight deviation in ideas between the vice president and the president. And then ultimately, you know, it was an individual in the Signal chat named SM, presumed to be Stephen Miller, who sort of brought the conversation back and argued, look, the president has given the green light for this targeted attack, and we're going to, you know, follow what the president has said here. So kind of an interesting deviation here. And certainly the vice president's office has come out with a statement suggesting that they were having a sort of thoughtful exchange of ideas, and that the vice president stands by this administration's foreign policy as it comes to Europe and our allies. But a very interesting note, and certainly one that no doubt our European allies are watching, you know, in the run up to this. And we'll see if that comes up in today's hearing as well, Vlad.
All right, Nicole Skanga for us reporting from Washington. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take our viewers now to that hearing where you see Senator Tom Cotton there of Arkansas beginning the Q&A portion of it. There have been some protests in the hearing. Let's listen.
Than they ever have before. Director Patel, back to my question. Could you give us some color about the threat that illegal migrants have posed, not only to my state, which has resulted in nearly 300 arrests in 2025, but also to the nation at large?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. I appreciate the time to address you all. Specifically to Arkansas, Senator, the priorities at the FBI, which I identified during my confirmation hearing and since, is attacking violent crime along with national security. And every single state in this country is a border state. Arkansas is no exception. Allow me to highlight the work of the men and women in the FBI and state and local law enforcement in the state of Arkansas. Since February 5th alone, we've had 220 illegal immigrants arrested on charges varying from violent offenses, weapons offenses, narcotics offenses, and serious violent felonies. 253 separate individuals have been charged related to those offenses. And here's something I want the American people to hear about narcotics and countering narcotics. Thousands of pounds of narcotics were seized in these 3 weeks in the state of Arkansas. Thousands, worth tens of millions of dollars. Everything from fentanyl to meth to cocaine to heroin to marijuana and more. And also including manufactured drugs. The FBI does have the biggest footprint in Arkansas, but we could not achieve this mission without our state and local law enforcement partners, which has been one of the priorities since I took the helm at the FBI. They provide the greatest ground level intelligence to conduct these operations in Arkansas and in every single state across the union. Since February 5th, we've assisted with the arrest of hundreds of criminals and illegals throughout your state, and that was just a 3-week operation. Prior to that, Senator, there was a bust of 17 federal indictments relating to a meth lab in the state of Arkansas in the southwest corner of your state. All of those individuals are now facing prosecution for hundreds of pounds of illegal opioids, guns, and other illicit material. So we will continue to do that work. We will work it 7 days a week, 365 days a year, not just in your state, Mr. Chairman, but in every state.
Thank you, Director Patel. As Director Gabbard highlighted from the annual threat report, Director Ratcliffe, many, if not most, of the chemical precursors for deadly fentanyl produced by Mexican drug cartels originates in China. China, of course, is a techno-totalitarian police state. They have technology to monitor their own people that Soviet Russia could have only imagined. Is there any reason, Director Ratcliffe, to believe that China could not monitor and crack down on this flow of chemical precursors to Mexico if it chose to do so?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. No, there's nothing that prevent China, the People's Republic of China, from cracking down on fentanyl precursors. As you well know, Senator, one of the reasons that they don't is that there are more than 600 PRC-related companies that produce those precursor chemicals in an industry that generates $1.5 trillion. That is one of the reasons that we see that Chinese efforts to affect the fentanyl precursors are really limited in nature and intermittent in nature, and not a dedicated effort to enforce their own laws and regulations to crack down on this.
Thank you, Director Ratcliffe. I have many more questions I could ask, but I'm going to try to lead by example and stay within the 5-minute limit for the benefit of senators. I remind everyone there is a vote scheduled at noon. I hope to finish the open portion of this hearing before that vote closes, after which time we'll move to the closed portion. The Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to take your extra 13 seconds, but I want to go back to what I addressed at the outset. I mean, this was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost. The Houthis had this information, could reposition their defensive systems. So I want to get a little more information about this. Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address. So you're not. Are you denying? Ma'am, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat.
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security Council.
It's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously
stated, is it classified or non-classified information on this text?
I can confirm.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a signal messaging group.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide some context, Senator, to that?
Yes, but I've got a series of questions.
Well, but I think it's important because at the outset you made a couple of comments about signal messaging using encrypted apps. So that we're clear, one of the first things that happened when I was confirmed as CIA director was signal was loaded onto my computer at the CIA, as it is for most CIA officers. One of the things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, the signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is.
I've got a series of
decryption. So to finish,
I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels.
Right.
So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with
So are
those
you saying
processes,
that
and finally, just please, so my communications, to be clear, in a signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee. You know, let me go on. Director Gabbard, you are the security executive and set access guidelines for classified information. Did you contact the defense secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a skiff?
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then if
signal
there was no
check.
classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question. If this was Director Gabbard, if this was a rank and file intelligence officer who did this kind of careless behavior, what would you do with them?
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that
And
signal.
if there's no classified in materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat. This is strangely familiar, and I think my colleagues will remember, when you couldn't answer the question, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Man, I have serious doubts about anyway. Director Gabbard, I'm going to give you this. Tweeted just 11 days ago, and I'm quoting you. Any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. So if this information is classified, what are you going to do?
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is there was no classified information that was on
the
this
committee should get that information. Director
and the
Patel,
National Security
Director
Council
Patel, my time's about out, and I'm going to use my 12 seconds up the chairman game. Director Patel, has the FBI launched any investigation of this?
Senator, I was just briefed about it late last night, this morning. I don't have an update.
I would like to get an answer by the end of the day.
At this point in the ordinary course of affairs, I would recognize Senator Collins. She asked me to express to you that she is under the weather this morning. She regrets her absence, but anticipates submitting written questions to which I would request your prompt replies for the senator. Senator Cornyn.
Director Gabbard, I applaud President Trump's efforts to try to bring an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. I want to read a statement out of the annual threat assessment and just confirm that you agree with this. It says Russia views its ongoing war with Ukraine as a proxy conflict with the West, and its objective to restore Russian strength and security in its near abroad against perceived U.S. and Western encroachment has increased the risks of unintended escalation between Russia and NATO. Do you agree with that statement? And that is in the annual threat assessment, correct?
Correct.
I'd like to refer to an AP story, Associated Press, dated March 21st, 2025. The title of the article is Western Officials Say Russia is Behind a Campaign of Sabotage Across Europe. This AP map shows it. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that speak made part of the record.
Without objection.
The document that AP compiled, and I presume this is through open sources, documented 59 incidents, including cyber attacks, spreading propaganda, plotting killings, or committing acts of vandalism, arson, sabotage, or espionage. Is that consistent with your understanding and impression of what Russia's currently engaged in Europe?
Senator, I haven't seen that specific article, but I can confirm that we assess Russia's attempts to conduct such sabotage activities in Europe.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm most concerned about following some of the discussions between Russia and Ukraine and the United States and our other allies, obviously, as I said, peace between Ukraine and Russia is the desirable end state. I think you'd have to be crazy to say otherwise. But I also want to talk a little bit about the unexpected or maybe unintended consequences of European insecurity. I know the incoming Chancellor of Germany has talked about the possibility that Germany might share its nuclear weapons with Ukraine and suggested that the UK would be part of that. I know that Poland has talked about acquiring nuclear weapons, and perhaps other European countries to make up for what they view as a receding of the American umbrella of protection. General Krause, what would be the result of the proliferation of nuclear weapon-armed countries in Europe if, in fact, that would occur as a result of the perception of European insecurity?
Senator, thank you for the question. One of the things that the intelligence community works very hard on is to understand who has nuclear weapons throughout the planet. And as discussed in the opening statements, both by the chair and by Director Gabbard, the proliferation and the increase in the types and the lethality of nuclear weapons is one of the things that we have to track and we as a nation are going to have to face. It has changed dramatically in the last 5 years and will continue to change over the next 5 years. The addition of additional countries which have their own deterrence policies and will act in a nuclear dialogue, or the presence of those weapons, the security of those weapons, the movement and the threat of use of those weapons complicates the environment by which all of us will operate and will complicate all of the decisions by which all future conflict and the political decisions that we support of the decision makers.
It makes the world a more dangerous place, does it not?
Senator, yes, it does.
And just by way of history, Ukraine used to have the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons on the planet, but as a result of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and the United Kingdom, the Budapest Memorandum documented a commitment by Russia and the United States to protect the territorial integrity of Ukraine in exchange for them giving up their nuclear weapons. Did I correctly summarize the content of the Budapest Memorandum back in 1994?
Yes, Senator, you did, and Ukraine willingly gave up its weapons for the protection of others.
Thank you very much.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, my colleagues and I feel very strongly about the war planning meeting over unclassified phones. Obviously reckless, obviously dangerous. Both the mishandling of classified information and the deliberate destruction of federal records are potential crimes that ought to be investigated immediately. And I want to make clear that I'm of the view that there ought to be resignation, starting with the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense. Director Ratcliffe and Director Gabbard, have you participated in any other group chats with senior Trump administration officials in which classified information was shared using phones that weren't cleared for such information? Question for the two of you.
Senator, thank you for the question. I haven't, your question was, have I participated in any other group chats sharing classified information? To be clear, I haven't participated in any signal group messaging that relates to any classified information at all.
Okay. Director Gabbard?
Senator, I have the same answer. I have not participated in any signal group chat or any other chat on another app that contained any classified information.
Yeah, and I just think it's important to follow through here. Would the two of you cooperate with an audit to confirm that that is that is the case?
I have no objection.
Senator, I'll certainly comply with any follow-up that the National Security Council would deem appropriate. But again, to be clear, the use of signal message end-to-end encryption applications is permissible and was, in this case, used permissibly, at least to my understanding, and in a lawful manner.
The seriousness of this is so clear. That's why I want to have an audit, and both of you gave me an answer indicating that you would be open to that, and I appreciate it. Director Patel, you weren't in this particular group chat, but have you participated in any chats on unclassified phones with other administration officials relating to national security? And if so, on what other topics?
Thank you for your question, Senator, not that I can recall.
Okay. Question I have for you, Director Gabbard, involves this question of Elon Musk wasn't going to see the military's China war plans because he said he, quote, has business in China and he would be susceptible perhaps to that. That was his comment. So as DNI, you're responsible for security clearance policies across the government. Under your watch, how are you going to go about carrying out this obligation? Because I think it obviously is a very significant one in terms of American national security.
Thank you, Senator. As you know, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence provides oversight over these different 18 intelligence elements. Leaders within those elements are empowered with that responsibility to uphold the trust that the American people have placed in them. In this example that you've cited, both Secretary Hegseth as well as President Trump completely denied the assertion that Elon Musk was going to receive any kind of classified war plan brief pertaining to China or any other country.
So on the question of whether the president has the prerogative to get clearances is really the area that I want to touch on, because you're formally responsible for security clearance policies, and that's why I'm asking about it. So can a president decide who gets the clearance?
Yes.
So what about your role? You're formally responsible for security clearance policies.
That is also true.
So how do we resolve it? President just gets his way.
The elected president and commander-in-chief has the authority to provide a security clearance to those who he deems necessary.
Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member, I think we have to have a further discussion on this and figure out what the ground rules, are. I think it's clear what the director says. I just think we need more clarity, because I think you have the formal responsibility for security clearances, and now we've heard that this somehow is going to be the president's project, and I think we ought to have further discussions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you to all of you. Your service to the country. It matters. There are a lot of citizens of our country right now that have much greater security in their life because of the work.
Been watching a hearing on Capitol Hill with top intelligence officials. This was a hearing that was already on the books, but of course, in the wake of that Signal Group text chain in which the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, was inadvertently added, allegedly, by Mike Waltz, that hearing has taken on an entirely new dimension. As you can hear there, Republicans sort of talking about other issues, Democrats focusing on that Signal chat. Mugo Odiwe picks up our coverage live from San Francisco right now.